Ken Frank. I'm a professor in the College of Education, Measurement and Quantitative Methods at Michigan State, and also in Fisheries and Wildlife in the College of Agriculture at Michigan State. I also have an appointment in adjunct in Sociology. So I think we should be paying attention to the networks in which people interact with social networks and how that affects their response to, how that affects their decisions about how to use natural resources, how to extract natural resources. And I think we should be paying attention to how global forces can shape those networks. The first part of the talk was establishing the importance of social networks for natural resource use. Establishing the importance and showing that there's been evidence of that in the literature, and also identifying when social networks are not important, like if you're just doing conventional farming. The second part of the talk was about the venues in which those social networks were shaped. And a venue here might be a bar the two fishermen interacted in, or a community meeting, or a policy meeting, something like that. I think studying, I always wanted to be a social scientist. I majored in statistics, but in statistics they teach you to treat everybody as independent, which is strange for someone who wants to be a social scientist. So I think it's exciting to figure out how people are interacting with each other and how that affects what they do. It gets us out of the mindset of just this individual responding to an incentive or a reward. And then I think it's also exciting to think about how those interactions are shaped by forces outside the individual. I think we found, I and Christina Prell and Oriane Bodine and others have found that, Beatrice Corona, have found that the way people use natural resources is affected by their social networks. I think we've been finding that for a few years. In particular, what I was emphasizing today was the way venues can shape our social networks. The example that I gave was public policy documents written by climate scientists. The documents are venues that convene people, and they interacted in those venues, they had some common interests, they produced something. And then the set of venues in which people participated created a structure. And related to that structure, the people who bridged across different groups were more likely to be policy advocates. That's a long way to go, but it helps us to understand where policy advocates come from scientists who are not trained and by disposition would not be policy advocates. So the practical implications would be to have people who create venues be aware that the venues they create can affect the networks of people who interact, not just affecting their behavior at the moment. So when I create a public forum to discuss a particular policy, maybe about energy use or something like that, I am one actor of many who's creating venues that can then shape the networks that emerge. And so that would be the sort of the practical application. And then as I understand that, I might be aware that people who bridge across many venues are the ones most likely to be policy advocates. And that's very practical. So now we have a sense of where these policy advocates come from. The theoretical implications are these venues help us understand how macro forces translate down to affect individual behavior. Sometimes individuals just respond to a macro event or a reward or incentive, but other times they respond based on who they interacted with in some venue that was created also by the macro force. So the example would be the state creates a public policy hearing. In that public policy hearing, I interact with certain people. That could change my beliefs, my behaviors, and now that helps us understand how the state action ultimately affected me as an individual. Well, I hope that people doing field studies about natural resource usage in other areas pay attention to the social networks that people are embedded in, but also the venues that people participate in and how those venues shape the networks and other actions of the people.